Thank you. Take a deep breath, close your eyes, and picture this. Hold in your mind a picture of a doctor or a lawyer or a best-selling artist. Hold this picture in your mind as you open your eyes, and we see how AI interpreted this same prompt. ChatGPT came back with a lawyer, an engineer, a best-selling artist, a judge, an executive, a doctor, a board member, a management consultant, the head of design. 9 pictures, 9 professions, 9 men. This is because of default thinking, specifically masculine defaults, where we place men at the center and women as other. I came across this terminology and this frame of thinking in the brilliant book, Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. And once you start looking for these defaults, you see them everywhere. And not just when it comes to gender. The pictures that I shared are also guilty of being white by default. 9 pictures, 9 men, 9 white men. And this kind of thinking is very pervasive. In my presentation today, I want to draw the link between the theme of invisibility, which was 2023 UX Copenhagen, and degrowth and consumerism, 2024 UX Copenhagen. And I want to do it through this lens of default thinking. I'm Ruby. My name's Ruby Pryor. I've come here from Singapore and I'm super excited to be here to present this to all of you. My lofty goal is that by the end of this presentation, you see the world around you differently. And you see it more critically. And you're ready to engage with it with a set of different lenses and focuses than what you've had before. And to start us off, we're going to examine particularly masculine defaults and also white defaults, and look at this through 3 different lenses: product, UX, and UI. And I'm going to explain how it shows up for each of these 3 things. Starting with product. The way that masculine defaults really show up in product is by designing for a user, a standard user. That user is often coded as a man. How this might look is Fitbit in 2018 releasing a feature that let you track your period. In 2018. This is a company that was founded in 2007 and released its first product in 2009. That is a 9-year gap where they missed one of the most fundamental and essential health metrics that most women track. And to put this in perspective, the historical record suggests that women have been tracking their periods for over 20,000 years. Sandy Toksvig has this beautiful quote that she shared about her experience at university with her anthropology professor, where she says, "Tell me, what man needs to know when 28 days have passed? I suspect that this is woman's first calendar." So fundamental is understanding our own menstruation and fertility that potentially the human ability to even mark time came from there. And yet, we see companies forgetting to design these types of features that women want and need. And this is not just about doing what's right. It's also about good business. In that 8-year gap, Flow was created, a company that's centered around this ability for women to track their periods. And it has a value of $800 million. That's a valuation that the big companies, big fitness tracking companies like Apple and Fitbit missed out on. This is default male thinking. It also shows up in UX, in user experience. So for context here, women are 26 times more likely to be harassed online compared to men. This is greater again when it comes to women of colour, women with disabilities, and marginalised women. In the US, about 1/4 of African Americans have experienced harassment online. This is pretty significant statistics. So when any social media company is designing the user experience to report online harassment, they are designing an experience that certain cohorts are going to use more. So when they underinvest in that experience, the way it manifests is in a worse experience, more likely for women and for people of colour. So when I've had to report online harassment and come across a flow that looks like this, it is so unbelievably stressful. I was met with 13 different options. And you've got to remember that if you're reporting online harassment, you're pretty stressed out to begin with. And I did not want to sit there and have to think, was this harassment? Was this sexual content? Was this explicit content? Did it come from a fake account? And try and reason my way through the definition of each of these things. I especially didn't want to do all of that work to only actually be able to pick one definition. And I particularly then did not actually want a definition thrown in my face of what it was that I had just experienced. I also had no idea what it meant if I would be informed about this, the report, and where this would go. All of that was totally unintelligible to me. And throughout this entire experience, I had no idea if that content was still there or if it had been deleted already. This experience was stressful and overwhelming in the worst possible way. And underinvesting in these types of features are going to affect certain groups more. Default masculine also shows up in user interfaces, and it can look like this. It can look like a restaurant booking app that autofills Mr., then has to be changed to anything else. It can look like an airline booking where male is listed before female, despite F coming before M in the alphabet. And we see this even when a company understands that A for American goes before B for British, they somehow forget their alphabet when it comes to knowing that F for female comes before M for male. And we see this even when the application is for a woman's development program. Still male comes first. That's default male in user interfaces. And it just gets more complicated when we go multimodal and when we look at voice. In your head, what voice do you hear coming out of a device like this? I know for me that when I'm out there in the world talking to my phone or a self-service checkout or the Bluetooth pairing of my headphones, that voice is coded feminine. Overwhelmingly, our voice assistants have a feminine voice. And the rationale that tech companies really like to put forward for this is that, people just prefer women's voices. Like any woman sitting in this audience who's received feedback on her communication style for being too high-pitched or too shrill or talking too fast or being an up-talker or having too much vocal fry knows how utterly facetious that is. By way of illustration, a quick Google search, Hillary Clinton voice criticism, returns us over 4.7 million results. And many of these from esteemed publications like The Atlantic, with in-depth articles discussing why people don't like this woman's voice. Compare that to Hillary Clinton voice praise. Not only do we get 1 million fewer results, they're also all metaphorical. No one's actually talking about how they like her voice. They're talking about her voice in the abstract. People don't prefer women's voices. They prefer women's voices in a very specific use case of outsourcing domestic drudgery, of terse order taking to add something to my shopping list or turn on the lights. That's the context in which society has deemed women's voices acceptable. And a UNESCO report has said that this reflects reinforces and spreads gender bias of having feminine-coded voices in these devices. And it doesn't end there. The way we interact with these devices and the way companies decide to have these devices respond back to us can further reinforce this again. For example, when some of the assistants on phones were first released, if you said to Siri, "You're a slut," she would respond, "I'd blush if I could." Someone made a decision that she would say that. She's not sentient, particularly back in about 2013 when she was released. This kind of appreciation for sexual harassment, again, further reinforces this kind of gender bias. To add insult to injury, when you're talking to these devices, they may not know information about women. When Alexa was asked about the results of the World Cup match between Australia and England, she kind of shrugged and said, "What match?" Because the person didn't ask specifically for the Women's World Cup, and Alexa didn't understand then that any football had been played. To add even further insult to injury, originally these devices understood men better. So you have a woman device that you might be asking about information about women that doesn't understand you and can't respond to you. It seems like, to be fair, they're getting slightly better when it comes to understanding women more equally with men, but racial disparities absolutely still remain in their ability to understand people across the spectrum. So we're left with 3 levels of bias in voice assistants: in the interfaces, in the interactions, and in the information. This is what bias in technology looks like. And it comes from this central fallacy that there's a neutral, and that neutral is neutral for everybody. And these examples show that is just not the case. For the rest of this presentation, we're going to explore more defaults, moving beyond the ones that I shared at the beginning, and discuss how they show up in technology and specifically in UX. Towards the end, we'll move into the "so what can we do" portion of the talk. Here's another little quiz. I was born in July. Does that make me a summer baby or a winter baby? Hands up for summer baby. Hands up for winter baby. I gave it away. I'm a winter baby. July in Australia is deepest, darkest winter, we think. It's our coldest time of the year. The nights are the longest, the days are the shortest. In Australia, July is winter. This kind of insistence that July is summer is Northern Hemisphere default. And it is something that I come across all of the time as someone who was born in the Southern Hemisphere. It shows up like this when movies will talk about the top hits of the summer or movies coming this spring. It shows up like this when someone messages me on LinkedIn with a proposal for something happening in spring, which to me is completely unintelligible when you add on the layer that I live in Singapore, and this is the graph of the average annual temperature across months in Singapore. You try and draw a box around spring, summer, autumn, winter, it makes no sense. Our average temperature ranges between 29 and 32 every single month. Seasons are not universal, and an insistence that they are is a form of default thinking. Kudos when someone gets it right. Well done, Barbie, saying coming in July rather than coming in summer. This is a much more inclusive form of communication that's going to be understood across the world. And this matters for UX. The way that we talk about time matters in how we do design. And you see this show up most notably when it comes to dates. So across the world, there are lots of different formats that folks use to tell time. Day, month, year is probably the most common across the world. Year, month, day is common in parts of Asia like China, and month, day, year, more common with our friends in the States. And yet, when registering for a new account with Netflix, I met with month, day, year, which is not how I would conceive of time as an Australian living in Singapore. You see this even when a company knows full well exactly where you are, calling out and customizing the fact that I'm in Singapore, so the phone number area code is filled in and the terms and conditions are localized to Singapore. And yet the way they talk about time is still centered on another conception of what dates look like. LinkedIn also blows my mind every time that they do this. In the top row, they've got it spelled out to the nth degree exactly what time and date it is, only to totally confuse me on the following line when I read that as being scheduled for the 3rd of July rather than the 7th of March, with no kind of labels for what this date looks like. This interface ends up being grossly confusing. It's better when it's specified as much as possible. So in this interface, day, month, year is more familiar to me and the lens that I place on the world. But you see this intersect with accessibility. The fact that these labels are inline means as soon as you start interacting with it, they're gone. And so it would be very unsurprising that folks would make mistakes when filling in their birth date when booking with this airline. It can be better, of course, if we have customization like Calendly allows you to set your preference, whether or not you want month or day to come first. They fall short of allowing year to come first, which would be maybe truly inclusive, but this is on the right path. Another way that this default can manifest is when we're talking about money. So I read this article recently, don't judge me, I don't know why, I was like entranced by this. My husband and I flew 15 hours in economy. Bidding on a bubble seat made the long flight bearable. I take a lot of long flights maybe, but this article, I was like, I've got to read this. This sentence blew my mind. We paid 277 Canadian dollars, about $207, for a bubble seat on our way to New Zealand, and 321 Canadian dollars, about $240, on the return trip. So for context, this is me, an Australian, sitting in Singapore reading this article. The currency that we use in Singapore is the dollar. The currency we use in Australia is the dollar. And this article referenced New Zealand, and the currency they use is the dollar. So what on earth was this sentence saying? I could reasonably interpret this $207 to be any of those three currencies: Singaporean, Australian, New Zealand. Who knew? I mean, obviously, it was American. I feel pretty justified calling out Business Insider when it comes to this, because this is how they describe themselves. Business Insider tells the global tech, and yet they'll just throw in a dollar sign willy-nilly, assuming that everyone around the world is going to interpret that the same. And this matters as well when it comes to UX. It's really important that we specify the currency visibly and often when it comes to online and e-commerce. This site, for example, just used a dollar sign all over until I got to checkout, so only then could I actually appreciate how much this actually cost. Amazon does it better, where they have the currency symbol right up front the whole time you're shopping to make it really clear and transparent how much you're spending. And this can really get brands into trouble. Airbnb, for example, was fined millions of dollars in Australia for just having a dollar amount without a unit specified, because this misled customers into thinking they were paying a lower price than they actually were, because the US dollar is stronger than the Australian. So having care and attention to this is really important, because a lack of it can have real-world consequences for the companies that we work for. Okay, so we've done time and we've done money. We're going to do our next default. Modern history question. Who was the Japanese Prime Minister between the 26th of December 2012 and the 16th of September 2020? Okay, I've heard someone say it. I'm not going to ask you to yell it out, but keep in your mind the answer to this question. Because the answer to the question that I had in my mind is not actually the preferred answer to this question. Japan wants you to say its leader's name correctly, Abe Shinzo. Those of you that answered this question and probably had it in your mind likely were thinking Shinzo Abe. And the media that I read when he was Prime Minister generally referred to him in this way. But it's not necessarily the preferred way when it comes to Japanese naming conventions. And this is another kind of default thinking. Maybe it's Western default thinking about the idea that names are constructed. Names vary a lot all over the world. The order of names, for example, in China, it's much more common to have a family name come first and a given name comes second. Xi Jinping. Xi is actually the family name, Jinping being the given name. The length of names can vary very much across the world, from two-letter names all the way through to no upper limit. Apostrophes are common in some names like O'Donnell. Diacritics are much more common in some languages than others. You might know them as accent marks. And of course, the number of names varies widely across the world. 2, 3, 4, 5, there's no upper limit for how many names folks may have. And this matters when it comes to how we design in UX. I got in trouble when I was in Spain last year trying to book a nail appointment, and I came across this form. So it asked nombre, primer apellido, segundo apellido. So that's name, first family name, second family name. And I don't have a second family name. And this form did not let you leave that blank. So it was constructed for someone who was different to me, and it meant that I got stuck. I see this a lot also living in Singapore, when I'll have brands send me emails saying, "Hi, Pryor." They've addressed me with my family name first, which might be really normal for some other folks, but for me, might read a little bit different. Some companies do it slightly better. Generally, the more specificity we have around what we are requesting, the better. The terms first name and last name are kind of nonsensical once you start thinking about how that manifests really differently across the world. Given name, family name, there are terms that we can use that are more inclusive and more clear when it comes to how we design this. Defaults are contextual. These examples show you that in different parts of the world, the default is going to look very different around which name comes first, how many names there are. These things are going to look very different. Another example of this. So this is a menu from a hotel in Vietnam. And this is very common on menus where you see this little green leaf denoting vegetarian. Super, super common. Because the default in so many parts of the world in restaurants is that there will be meat in the food unless it is called out as vegetarian. That's like meat eating by default. The way this can manifest in UX is when I, a vegetarian, am suggested recipes like chicken by Google. I want to tell it, please stop sending me chicken. But these are the only options that it had for me, that I'm not interested in the story, that I'm not interested in baking, or that I'm not interested in stories from ABC. It didn't cross their mind to include a category not interested in stories about meat. The default is everyone would eat meat, anything else is an aberration. But this is not the same all over the world. When you look at a menu from an Indian restaurant, it usually looks like this: veg, non-veg, where vegetarian is the default and non-vegetarian is not. Defaults are contextual. And of course, there will be some instances where people just buck the default because they choose to, like our wonderful conference today, which is vegetarian by default. Thank you, Helly. So these misses that I've talked about today come from default thinking. Masculine defaults, white defaults, Northern Hemisphere defaults, Western defaults, meat-eating defaults. These are all different forms of default thinking that influence the world around us. So what can we do? If you're sitting there and you think, I want to change this, what can we do? And look, there are things that we can do. We can make our assumptions explicit. We can have more diverse teams, and diverse teams that have space for diverse thought through strong psychological safety where dissent is welcomed. We can have localization that moves beyond just text. Interfaces themselves can be localized to make them more intelligible for folks across the world. We can allow our users to customize more. We can do more rigorous research, but ultimately we need time, we need space, we need budget if we're going to do all of these things. The good news here, I guess, is that businesses kind of love questioning defaults. For example, Bumble questioned the idea of defaults around dating to deconstruct that to create a space that tried to center the experience of women, where women had to make the first move when it came to dating. Zappos questioned old wisdom about how much time their customer service representatives should spend on the phone, getting rid of any kind of quotas or targets for customer service reps when engaging with end users, and instead empowering those folks to spend as long as they wanted on the phone, and even giving them a budget to create special moments of delight for their end users. Patagonia centered the environment in the way that it worked, believing that you shouldn't always be purchasing more from their own company, even running campaigns saying, don't buy this jacket. They questioned this default that the environment should be a secondary point of view when it came to business. WhatsApp, despite being an American company, the earlier iterations of its product really focused on markets outside of the US. India and Brazil were some of the largest markets for WhatsApp. And when it came to be acquired by Facebook for one of the largest ever acquisitions, over $15 billion, it was this focus on emerging markets that made it so attractive. Uber and Airbnb questioned maybe the most fundamental default when it comes to business, the idea that you have to be profitable. Instead, they went for growth over profit. So businesses will question some defaults, but maybe not all. As Melinda Gates put it, we as a society care about diversity, but we really care about how much money we make. So is the solution here then connected to the bottom line? And I know some folks here are going to be feeling really uneasy about this because it's still buying into the same paradigm that many people want to question. But is this a solution? That instead of saying that someone can't complete a form, we say that we're missing revenue because someone isn't making it through our experience. Instead of someone feeling alienated by an interaction that didn't address them in the way that they prefer, maybe we say the customer churned. Instead of saying that someone needed assistance, we can talk about them increasing our costs through having to interact with customer service. Maybe this is the solution. Another way is to highlight the risk of not questioning defaults. Many thinkers have posited that the 2008 financial crisis happened because folks had an unrelenting assumption that house prices would always go up. And that was proved wrong in the most spectacular fashion. The idea that business as usual is always going to be business as usual is an assumption that will not always ring true. But what we do know is that change can start in design. So when we think about our product, the product that we are working on and building and sending out into the world, and when we think about our practice, how it is that we do design, there are ways that we can be more inclusive in this from the get-go. When it comes to our product, we can have greater specificity in the language that we use, no longer talking about spring or winter, but bringing in months and talking about July or December. When it comes to our practice, we should question the way we have been using language which could be coded in a racist or colonialist way. For example, the practice of describing deceptive patterns as dark patterns has been criticized by folks for having racist connotations. Instead, we should be calling them deceptive patterns or misleading patterns or unethical patterns. But we should question our own language and how we're describing our own practice to lead by example. When it comes to imagery in the products that we create, we should make sure we're having inclusive imagery and showing folks of all different genders, all different races, and all different cultures. And that also expands to the way that we work inside of design, building things like personas, and if we are doing that, making sure that they too are diverse in the way our users are diverse. And finally, when it comes to our interfaces, making sure that we're structuring things and creating a hierarchy that makes sense to our global user base. And in our practice, being really critical when we're thinking about what good looks like. I often hear good design being simple and clean and minimalistic. But is that good design? Or is that good Western design? Because I tell you, operating in Asia, good design, market-leading design can often look very different to that. Research it, design it, propose it. If we are backwards with coming forwards as designers, it's not clear that anyone else is going to do it. This same kind of thinking should lead into the way that we are questioning the operating models of our businesses as well. Growth is growth by default. It has been an unquestioned assumption for so long, and we can be part of that group that seeks to change it. So where does all of this leave us? I want to finish with this quote from Invisible Women. Whiteness and maleness are silent, precisely because they do not need to be vocalized. Whiteness and maleness are implicit. They are unquestioned. So my ask to all of you, make the implicit explicit. Make the silence loud. Dismantle the defaults and build something better. Thank you.